it's not a huge number of people. That's the first thing. It's a very, very small percentage of the population, and very, very small percentage of let's say, plant source only food. Given that, we have seen the most danger. In my 40 years, I've seen the most bad stories. Now, the people who can succeed on it, and there are people who succeed, relatively speaking, okay? Again, what is success? At 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, 30 years? What are we talking about? I'm talking from a 40-year perspective. I'm talking about being 99% live food for 28 years, okay? And a lot of people feel good for a week or 2 weeks or 2 years or 3 years. Some people, honestly, are taking supplements on the side, and they're not telling you that, and I know that for a fact, including some of the leaders. They're taking B12 shots and so forth. So we don't want to be fooling ourselves. And people generally get harmed. Now, let's actually be a little scientific. There have been 2 major fruitarian communities that have been attempted. One is in the Vicamakama area and in South America. And after 1 year, women stopped having their periods, the people got mentally imbalanced, and it was a pretty big disaster. The person running that, Johnny Lovewisdom, became paralyzed and legs down. It was a total failure. Women couldn't reproduce. And I've met people who were there, and it's like, this didn't work, okay? So for all the success stories, and there always will be, Harvey Diamond and Marilyn Diamond, when they were married, they're both wonderful people, and their book was pretty much a fruitarian focused book. And I said, well, how many people work? I know people don't succeed on it. I said, be honest, let me know, how many people are really succeeding? They said at best 30%. Okay? So this is kind of what we're saying, okay? Now, there are people promoting it. I don't, that's fine, but it becomes religious rather than looking at the bigger picture. So what I'm saying is the second study was in Australia. It was by another natural hygienist person. And it lasted 3 years. So they had some sort of luck at 3 years. But what happened was the person running it stopped it because he had ethics. You only go so far, and you see, what do you see? Women can't produce, or if they do reproduce, their children, and he said that, is that they had far more mental deficiencies, far more mental retardations. Like, oh, well, that's great. Do I want to do that? Do I want to be responsible for that? And that is part of the thing. 2, same thing happens. By 3 years instead of 1 year, the woman became infertile, probably the men too. They couldn't reproduce, that's the bottom line. Mentally, they became very imbalanced, weakened, couldn't really function very well. And he just called it into it. And he was very disappointed. So when you do an actual study, and there's only been 2 studies done, you don't get that kind of results. Now, is there an exception here? Yeah. Is there an exception there? Yeah. I mean, I actually have a constitution that could really be fruitarian. And I was fruitarian for 2 years. I didn't feel quite as strong. I also felt I may have been creating a little candida, and I see rampant candida in this. Well, would you expect anything different? Not really. The people who can do it have very poor glucose metabolism. And they're what we call in my system a slow oxidizer or sympathetic, depending on the systems. And you can do it. What I did after 2 years, I said, I don't feel this is really working. Because you got to talk a few years, not a month or 2 and so forth. And I'm wanting, as a spiritual athlete, I want the best. So that's where I created the Rainbow Green Life Food Cuisine Phase 1. And I put myself on that for 3 months. And it was dramatic. No fruit whatsoever. And dramatic results. And it was actually during that time, well, after that time, but connected to it, because I've never really been off that diet, except I do have low glycemic fruits, cherries, berries, and things like that. Then on the 6th day of a green juice fast, I was able to do 601 push-ups when I was 60. Okay, which is when I was captain of undefeated Amherst College football team, National Football Hall of Fame, I could do 70 push-ups. So here I am 40 years later doing 601. What does that tell us? Something happened, and that diet is like magic. You know, what I found about it is, again, I still have, I have low carbohydrate, but I also have low protein in it too, and I do fine. So, and that is a therapeutic diet to start with. The problem with the sugar, and it's a big problem, is that fructose is 10 times more active as a glycosylation agent, which means it creates free radicals. It means it combines unnaturally with the lipids and the protein. It inflames the glia cells of the brain. It really ultimately creates different problems in the body that aren't good. We have growth problems like candida. We also know that cancer cells need 10 to 50 times more glucose or fructose. It's like, wow, well, if you got cancer, you don't want to be having a lot of fruit because it's going to aggravate. Now, is that just my idea? No. You have Brian Clemens down at Hippocrates. You have other places where we know that fruit is going to, sugar is going to aggravate cancer cells. So there's a lot that mitigates the thing. And of course, the longevity, the people who live the longest are the ones with the lowest sugar, including fruit intake. So those are kind of the considerations. People can kind of create a mood about themselves, but I know my work with diabetes, and I'm seeing hundreds of people have a real clinical practice, and I find very clearly, you give people a piece of fruit, I don't care if it's low glycemic or not, it's going to raise your blood sugar in almost everybody. Are there exceptions? There are, but that's not the rule. That's how people get it all confused, is you have a few people out there citing a few exceptions, and I think are misleading the people because they have a need that everybody should eat like them. I don't care how people eat, but clinically I know what I see, and I know what we get successful with thousands of people. And I have other doctors also kind of getting those kinds of successes. So that's what I go on. And I want to make it clear, there are a few people who can do that. But we don't want a moral thing about it. This is not a moral thing. It's not an ethical thing, as if you're superior for fruitarians. It's kind of silly, actually. What you want is to become a superconductor of the divine. And if you have to exercise 3 hours a day to burn off your sugar, that's a liability as far as I'm concerned. I'm for moderate exercise. I exercise 6 days a week, and I do my yoga, and I do my a little bit of weight training, and I do, my push-ups. Here I'm 68, and I'm doing, 200 push-ups every 2 or 3 days. But to me, that's tonifying. That's what exercise should be. So exercise is critical, but if you got to do it 3 hours a day to burn off your fat, to burn off your sugar, I'm skeptical that you're creating an imbalance and then another imbalance to do it. Plus, it takes a lot of time.